the French do utilize, and many cultures do around the world, utilize the organ meats of the animal. The organ meats, in particular, liver, kidney, heart, they're the most nutrient-dense parts of the animal. So you only need really a little bit, and you're getting all these vitamins and minerals and energy from the sun that's all packed in there.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey, Hilda here. Gourmet cuisine is synonymous with France. And think about it, even those words have French roots. What can we learn from French foodways? What perspectives to food or living can we incorporate into our own diet and lifestyle for better health today? This is episode 262, and our guest today is Tania Teschke. Tanya is the author of The Bordeaux Kitchen, an immersion into French food and wine inspired by ancestral traditions, and she is the maker of the Bordeaux Kitchen natural skincare line. Tanya lived for 3 years in the Bordeaux region of France, where she immersed herself in traditional French cuisine and culture. In our conversation today, Tanya addresses the French paradox, how they eat rich, creamy foods and yet remain so slim, 3 secrets she learned from the French for healthy eating, and how we too can learn to embrace the offcuts or organ meats as they do. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to personally invite you to our Wise Traditions Conference. I am so excited for this thing. You can even hear my voice breaking. It is November 13th to the 15th in Atlanta, Georgia. The theme is Staying Healthy in a Toxic World. Not only do we have amazing speakers, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Del Bigtree, Andy Wakefield, and more, but we're going to have fantastic food and a chance to just connect with one another and encourage each other at this difficult time. Please sign up today at wisetraditions.org so you can join me. And do it soon because early bird pricing is in effect only through September 20th. Sign up now and I'll see you there. Oh, and if for some reason we have to cancel the conference, don't worry. You will be entitled to a full refund. And this episode is brought to you by Bovine Tracheal Cartilage by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail organ meats, bone marrow, and bovine tracheal cartilage in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Bovine tracheal cartilage has unique and powerful effects on wound healing, immune conditions, joint health, and other conditions considered to be treatment-resistant to conventional therapies. And bovine tracheal cartilage provides concentrated amounts of connective tissue, immunoregulators, and cartilage building blocks that are now missing from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Tanya.
Hi, Hilda. Thanks for inviting me.
Let's kick it off talking about the French paradox. What do you know about that?
Well, the French paradox is an assumption, basically, or a theory that the French stay so slim, yet they eat so richly. And my retort to that would be, well, I think that the French stay slim because they eat so richly. So it's the traditional animal fats and the butter that they use in their cooking that keeps them so healthy and slim. The animal fats keep you satisfied. They're delicious. They're nutritious. And totally unlike the industrialized processed oils that we use nowadays, canola and cottonseed and safflower with the halo around their neck, So that's kind of the idea that I learned when I went over to France, observing the French creating or cooking recipes in their tradition using whatever our grandmothers and great-grandparents had access to, which really was not industrial seed oils, but the real fats and foods and whatever they could grow themselves or press themselves, like the olive oils, hand-pressed olive oils.
And they eat and cook this way unapologetically, don't they?
They do. And I think they're also very proud of the way they consume everything from nose to tail, including organ meats and the fats again. And people go into the butcher shops expecting that there be veal liver there or lamb kidneys, and they buy them up, and those are usually the first meats to go. But I would say less and less now in France, kind of the younger generations are beginning to kind of turn more to fast food. So I'm really trying to capture in my book the traditional foods that people relied on, and as an example for all modern societies, especially here in the U.S., to remember and rely on and reference these recipes and traditions and this thought of actually using the whole animal. We just sort of go pick something up for dinner rather than thinking about, well, if I had, a whole pig, how could I use all the parts and divide my, meal plan up that way and actually utilize the way they used to the whole animal. And it kind of leads to a bigger question in my mind, and that is, if we want to feed the world, how are we going to do that? But if we think about how much waste there is in terms of what we don't eat of the animal, we could be consuming many, many more parts rather than just the filet mignon, and we'd get a lot more out of each animal, really, rather than relying on monoculture and plants and that kind of farming where it's, there's an overuse of pesticides and that kind of thing. So this is sort of the journey that I've been on over the last several years.
Well, talk to us about that journey. How did you come across kind of this ancestral way of eating and living before you even went to France?
I grew up always going to Germany to see my family. And in Germany, there was, at least in the 70s and 80s, there was always a sense of conserving resources, whether it's water or electricity. And every year, my family, my aunt and uncle would slaughter a pig, and we would enjoy the Wurst and, the sausages and all of the different delicacies throughout the year of that ritual of the slaughtered pig. And I've always loved food and, seen my aunts and mom prepare food and grandmothers. I've been to France a few times, but when we actually moved to Bordeaux in 2013, I was looking to learn some more about food, how to prepare it the way the French do, since they're so famous for it. And I wanted to feed my family better. And so I was really conscious of ingredients. And while we were in Bordeaux, I asked people, and everyone knows how to cook there, it seems, and it wasn't hard to find people who would show me traditional family recipe. And I came across winemakers, of course, in Bordeaux. So I asked them, how do you make your wine, and what is it about it? And so much of what French culture is about is really a tie to the land and how you make use of the soil and the health of the soil, the terroir, where it is and what grows best there, and kind of the harmony between all these elements. And that really carries into the food and the recipes and the fresh ingredients they use. So I learned all of these things and kind of recorded it, and being a photographer, I ran around after everyone with my camera. And so kind of translated that all into a book that I can now reference, and anyone who's interested can kind of delve into and immerse themselves. So I'm really happy about that.
We are too, because this journey is one that, as the Weston A. Price Foundation, we're on as well. It's food, farming, and the healing arts. We get that it matters how the soil is cared for and tended, and animals are important, and eating nose to tail. All the things you've been saying, Tanya, are really part of our philosophy as well. So let's talk about the Bordeaux Kitchen. In there you mention the 3 secrets to French cooking. What are they, and can you go into detail about them?
Okay, well, the first secret would be utilizing what I call the farm fats, and those are the fats that you would find on a farm that you could kind of render or make yourself, such as the hand-pressed olive oil or churned butter or, lard from the pig or beef fat, tallow, that kind of thing. So those are my farm fats. Mm-hmm. And even France could even be traditionally divided up into parts where in the Mediterranean they used a lot of olive oil, In Normandy and Brittany, a lot of butter. In Alsace, for example, which is kind of French Germanic, they use a lot of lard, and tallow is sort of used a little bit everywhere. And then there's duck fat in the Southwest, where Bordeaux is. So, you cook anything in duck fat and it'll taste delicious.
Yes.
So that's a secret I uncovered while in France. And then another secret is simply fresh ingredients, fresh herbs, fresh produce. The French, they traditionally either grow their own or they go to the market. So they're always outside, very social, and go, to the market to get the fresh, every few days, really, to get their fresh produce. Now, of course, many people go to supermarkets, but there's always fresh produce. And, even they're very proud regionally of their cheeses and wines and sausage and meat products. So in each region, depending on where you go, you'll find, like in many places around the world, there's sort of a cultural attachment to the local food. So that's always a discovery and an excitement.
Yes.
And then the last one is really just the equipment. If you use a really good, sturdy cast iron pot, it'll last you a lifetime and you can pass it down generations. A cast iron pot, another name for it in French is fait tout, which means do everything. So you can do everything in it, as opposed to a Teflon or aluminum pan that you'll just end up throwing away. It's good to invest in a few good cast iron and stainless steel, very thick ones for sauces, that kind of thing. These are all the elements that will help you put together nourishing meals.
And what I love about that is we don't have to be in France to enjoy these secrets, the farm fats, the fresh produce, and the right equipment. So these are all at our fingertips as well if we pay attention.
That's right. And it's really, French cooking, I think, seems from the outside very complicated, but it's actually very simple. If you use some good sea salt or Himalayan salt, a natural salt, along with, fresh herbs and some good fat and a fresh piece of meat or vegetable, you're going to turn up with something that tastes great. And really, I've found even simple things like a mixture of garlic, rosemary, and thyme will make any roast, whether it's lamb, beef, even chicken or pork, taste great. And it's really not that hard. You just let the oven do the work.
I like that. And, this goes along with principle number 1 that Dr. Price found, that the healthiest indigenous people groups he came across around the world were the ones who were eating no refined or denatured foods. So not all of the, like you said, the oils with the halo around their necks or, the overly processed foods, because the ones that are natural and whole and real are going to actually be not only the most nutrient dense, but probably the tastiest too, don't you think?
Yes, definitely. And the more fat there is on a piece of meat, the tastier it's going to be. And the sooner it will satisfy you as well. So you're not going to be looking for, that next granola bar half an hour later.
I noticed another section of your book, you've divided up the chapter according to meats, and you have a bit about organ meats too. Talk to us about that.
Yes, I'm really excited about this chapter because the French do utilize, and many cultures do around the world, utilize the organ meats of the animal. The organ meats, in particular, liver, kidney, heart, they're the most nutrient dense parts of the animal. So you only need really a little bit, and you're getting all these vitamins and minerals and energy from the sun that's all packed in there. It's a wonderful nutrient density and the flavor as well. And it might seem a little off-putting if all you've been eating is salads and kale, but I think if you incorporate these meats into your life kind of slowly, and there are a lot of recipes in there they're really not that hard. You really just add butter. These will be very flavorful and, just a little bit at a time. And there's so much value in consuming the organ meats and knowing that you're nourishing your body and that of your children, if you're feeding them these things. But you're also contributing to a cycle where you're utilizing the entire animal and, you're not putting the butcher or the farmer in a bad position where all they can sell is is the filet mignon or the best steak or the loin. If you're able to help with kind of the economics of the butcher and the farmer by eating and being willing to eat all parts of the animal.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's kind of like we're not being wasteful, we're being mindful. And I understand that our ancestors would often choose the organ meats first. Even if you see an animal in the wild, it's not going for the muscle meat of the animal it just killed. It's going for the heart or the kidney or the liver. It's going for these organ meats. So it's funny that in our Western culture, we've moved away from eating these cuts of the meat.
Yeah, that's right. I think there is a certain amount of disgust that we have nurtured in our society and has pushed us towards something easier to think about, which are plants. And I understand this because I was there many years ago, 25 years ago. I was a vegetarian. And what ended up happening to me is I became very malnourished. I got very sick, lost 30 pounds. I had my appendix rupture. And I really believe it was because I had not been properly nourishing myself. And a lot of that had to do with not eating meat. I was kind of called myself a vegetarian. But part of that problem was not only the disgust, but just the ignorance. I didn't know how to prepare meats. And like a friend of mine in France said, you really just let the heat do the work. He said, I'm no chef. I just let the heat do it. So I think if we can, demystify meats and cooking by just breaking it down to its most simple components, flavor, heat, it makes it a lot easier to feel like we can nourish ourselves and not have to feel guilty or disgusted.
Can you share one of your recipes briefly? Give us an overview of like how to prepare, I don't know, maybe liver? Maybe would that be a good entryway into eating organ meats?
Oh yeah, liver is the most nutrient dense of them all, really. And I love liver, veal, beef, lamb, but a really good starting point would be chicken livers. Mm-hmm. They're easy to get. And actually that was kind of my gateway organ meat, if you'd like to put it that way. A friend of mine in France showed me her recipe. She chopped in a little bit of garlic and used, I believe it was duck fat, and put in some chicken livers, about a pound, I think, into a cast iron pan and stirred them around. I think we put in some parsley and salt and, let them cook through and enjoyed those over a salad. And it's so easy and so nutrient dense.
And chicken livers, I understand, have a milder flavor than the other livers. Is that right?
They're definitely milder. And something that might help that go down is to have some sweet potato with it, if you're kind of making a transition. But yes, they are milder than, I would say the extreme would be lamb liver. It's more pungent. So the next one that I would try would be veal liver, or beef liver. And I like to do that in coconut oil because I like the flavor of coconut. And having that with sweet potato is delicious, or just over a salad with, plenty of salt and maybe some olive oil for the lettuce. And it's a great meal.
Coming up, Tanya dispels the myth that liver is full of toxins. And she also dives into the French approach to dining and why slow is the way to go.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Thanks to many people just like you, North Star Bison is celebrating over 25 years of healing the land and feeding people well. Their focus from day one at North Star has been to raise meat as nature intended, to regenerate vital native habitats that sink mega amounts of carbon, which improve air and water quality, and support native wildlife, trillions of insects, and even fish, all while providing nutrient-rich, deeply nourishing foods that taste amazing and leave us feeling satisfied. At North Star, they even field harvest their animals to respect and preserve the dignity of life, as well as provide the tender, superior quality of product that nature intends. At North Star Bison, their flagship product is their 100% grass-fed and finished bison, but their offerings have grown to include Rocky Mountain elk, 100% grass-fed and finished beef and lamb, rabbit, pastured corn and soy-free pork, corn and soy-free chicken and turkey, 100% grass-fed raw cheeses, wild Alaskan sockeye salmon, raw pet foods, and so much more. Our family recently got an order, and we are just head over heels in love with North Star Bison. Their products are top-notch, as they say, and the taste is delicious. So order from them today. Go to northstarbison.com and spend over $250 and get free shipping. And feel free to use the code WAPF at checkout to get an additional 10% off your order. Again, go to northstarbison.com and rediscover food as nature intended. And this episode is brought to you in part by bovine tracheal cartilage by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced, nose-to-tail, organ meats, bone marrow, and bovine tracheal cartilage in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. The life work of Dr. John F. Pruden showed that bovine tracheal cartilage had unique and powerful effects on wound healing, immune conditions, joint health, and other conditions considered to be treatment-resistant to conventional therapies. All of these conditions were immune in nature, with the exception of the wound healing studies. According to Dr. Pruden, bovine cartilage closely resembles fetal mesenchyme, the primordial tissue from which muscle, bone, tendons, ligaments, skin, fat, and bone marrow, the heart of the immune system, all develop. Bovine tracheal cartilage provided concentrated amounts of connective tissue, immunoregulators, and cartilage building blocks that are now missing from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. What do you say to those who are like, oh no, I don't want to eat liver because doesn't it have all those toxins in it? Doesn't the body use it to filter toxins? What would you say to them?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a common argument. Again, I would say that liver is the most nutrient-dense food that we can possibly eat. And yes, while the liver might be a filter, it's, again, a filter. So it's not going to retain those toxins. They get filtered out into the system and out through the urine and blood. And, I just think that the concentration of minerals and mitochondria and vitamins in liver is just it's so dense that even just a bite, you don't even need kilos and kilos of it. Just a few bites will carry you through, for a week. I mean, a lot of people just have liver maybe once a week. I have it probably every other day, and it's helped me a lot on kind of building my strength, building up the iron in my own blood, and just feeling good about, again, using the whole animal.
Absolutely. And one thing that came to mind when you were speaking was I saw a graphic online somewhere where it showed a stomach full of like all these vegetables, and then it showed like how little room the liver or other organ meats might be taking up in the stomach. And then someone put under the graphic, like, you can go all day on the little bit of that nutrient-dense food, that animal products, as opposed to trying to go all day on that full stomach of vegetables, which might just take you a couple hours because it's just how the food is.
Yeah, these animal products really are satiating. And I'm not saying vegetable products have no place in our diet. I have a chapter on vegetables, and they're wonderful to have. And I've mentioned salad several times, and that's always a lovely, fresh complement to, any meat, really. But you're right that, one little bite or an egg or some bacon in the morning will carry you through, past lunch. And I used to be stuck in the rut of the granola bar, an hour after breakfast, after my cereal breakfast with skim milk, or even worse, rice milk, which just, burns like kindling in a furnace. I mean, what my family does is we have bacon and eggs every morning. Eggs cooked in butter, bacon without the sugar, preferably. And it holds my girls through. They almost don't even want to eat lunch because and they don't need the snack in the, middle of the morning like so many people I think do. And it's just been so helpful for us, also for mood stabilization and for blood sugar. It's really worth considering having a good piece of meat or fish or protein with some animal fat in the morning or at any meal, because I think it really can carry you through. And it certainly helped me carry me towards health.
And so the French aren't afraid of all of these different types of meats, are they?
No. And it's wonderful to go into, a butcher shop or even the supermarket, and they have many of the organs there, and people are not squeamish about buying them. And least of all, of course, the grandmothers who come in. And I actually worked in a butcher shop in Bordeaux, and I was behind the counter, kind of apprenticing and learning how to cut meat and serve the customers. And honestly, it was usually the sort of older generations who came in and bought the veal, like the lamb kidneys and the veal liver. And it was the young parents who came in and bought the ready-made cordon bleu and some of the other steaks. So everyone has to prepare what they can based on the time that they have. But the interesting thing about organ meats is that they're so delicate, they don't need a lot of time. Actually, you can pan fry a kidney or a slice of liver very quickly, and it's a great meal and something you can even warm up at work as well. So there are just a lot of things to consider when it comes to organ meats, and I think the French really have that down, at least traditionally. And not only the French, though. As I say in the end of my book, every culture has its own traditions that each culture should celebrate and uphold and not lose touch as we move faster and faster and try all the processed and fast foods out there that surround us. I think we really need to take a step back and remember where we came from and the traditions that we come from, and honor that and slow down and take the time. And we'll find that actually it's the most nutrient dense and doesn't really take that much time after all.
Who knew that fast food could be good for us? I mean, in that it doesn't take long for this food to cook and for it to nourish us well. So I'm afraid that we are so caught up in convenience, at least in our culture here in the U.S., that we miss the opportunity to nourish ourselves deeply. That's one thing I like about the French, too. Do you address at all in your book the time that they take to enjoy the meal?
Absolutely, yes. That is one of the key elements that I learned while in France, is that not only do you take the time to prepare the meal or to procure the meal, but to sit down and enjoy the meal with friends and family. And now the French, of course, in so many regions of France, they also have a bottle of wine on the table, or more than a bottle. But, it's not drunk in a fast fashion. You sit with your family and friends, you enjoy a glass of wine over conversation and bonding that you remember days, weeks, months, years later. And it's this camaraderie, companionship, and sharing that is so wonderful, and it slows you down. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity for conversation and exchange. They do talk a lot about food and wine while they're at the table as well. Everyone's proud of their regional delicacies, but it's a wonderful way to connect with the land and to connect with each other.
Sounds like a wise tradition to me. Well, you're painting a beautiful picture. It makes me want to just transport myself to France. But short of doing that, how can we feed our families in a like manner?
There's a chapter in the book, kind of what I call the family chapter. And I give the example of our family, not that it's the example, but it's just showing a way that we go about incorporating all of these practices that I've learned in France, techniques, and etc. And so I think, if you think about your family and how to nourish them best, what are the healthy options? What are the foods that you really would like them to have, so that what are the results? You'd like to, they don't do well with sugar. Well, then keep that out of the picture. For example, I guess an example would be we try to feed, as I said, the girls, our daughters, nutrient-dense breakfasts. And that's kind of the anchor for the morning that supports them throughout the day. And then we reconvene for dinner. And we always try to be together at these 2 meals. On the weekends, it's, we're together for maybe 3 meals. But during the week, it's about being together, thinking about, what do I want to eat, but what's going to give me the nourishment that I need and my children need. And so going from that point on, then you can kind of plan. And you also see, okay, well, what do I need to stock the fridge with, or what does the butcher have on sale this week? And, that kind of thing. You can sort of piece together a meal plan. But, we also get into things like turning off Wi-Fi when we don't need it. In fact, we use Ethernet cables. There are a lot of things like that. Or we try to use softer lights at night or blue blocking glasses to block out the screen light. And actually, I don't have my girls use the computer or phones after dinner, especially in the winter because it's dark, unless it's absolutely necessary for computer work. Traditionally, we didn't have these things. And I think it's helpful to just honor the way we might have a little candlelight sometimes. It's also more, as the Germans say, gemütlich, comfortable. And we just try to instill some of these values, food and family, into our daily routine, and also get outside when we can. So these are some of the things that I've learned from the French, and I think we could all incorporate. And it's not just the French, like I said, it's many cultures around the world who stay connected with the day and night cycles and with nature and with the food that they make and eat. That I think helps keep them healthy.
And do you process this stuff with your kids, Tanya? Like you were saying a moment ago, the difference between, let's say, my palate wanting something quick and I'm hungry and I want to grab those chips, or Mom, can we stop at Pizza Hut? Do you process with them why that might not be the best choice and help them figure things out as they go along?
Yeah, what we do is we try to be prepared for those moments. So we'll have nori seaweed as a snack. We also make our own date bars. And
wait, so they say, I want to stop at Pizza Hut, and you're like, here, have some seaweed.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, we don't stop at Pizza Hut. If we're traveling or something, we bring our snacks. Or we've been known to travel with pork ribs and roast on the plains. And the Beagle Brigade has found us, with just not the remnants, but just the smell of pork roast in our bags. It's because, of course you can't bring any meat into the country, but as we've traveled across the Atlantic. Anyway, but for, the date bars that I mentioned earlier, we'll make a snack food at home. The date bars are just nuts, seeds, and dates crushed up and rolled into a little, what looks like a granola bar. It's much more economical. It's an activity you can do with your children. And, and they love it. If you want them to eat more of it, then put chocolate chips in there. But anyway, that's, we try to have snacks that are whole dried figs, for example, or just cheese. Cheese is a great snack. And I know Sally Fallon has said this, cheese and cheese.
She calls it a complete food. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about, how people, they train folks to decipher or discern counterfeit money by showing them real money. They study a real $100 bill, and that way when they see the fake thing, they know it. And so it's like your kids, their palate is being trained to enjoy the good stuff. I bet it makes them less interested. I won't say completely disinterested, but less interested in what the world has to offer them to eat.
Yeah, they're kind of shocked by the public school lunches that are served, and they come home so often and say, I am so glad that we get your home-cooked lunches. So that's really nice. Though I have to admit, of course, one of my daughters loves baking, and so sometimes we'll have to go the non-gluten-free route and make something which, I begrudgingly let them do. But of course, we're not striving for perfection, but we're striving for overall an understanding of what's good nourishment. And we talk about, well, how does that make you feel after and the next day if you have those cupcakes versus the lamb chop?
So we're going to wrap up in just a moment. I want to ask you if we can put the recipe for the chicken livers and the date bars in our show notes. Would that be okay with you?
Oh, that's fine. Yes, I'd be happy to share those.
Awesome. So now I want to ask you the question I often ask at the end. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, just one thing to take a step in the right direction, what would you recommend that they do, Tanya?
Gosh, there's so many things, Hilda. It's the hardest question. So what I would say, and I've thought about this kind of thing, is question your assumptions. Because if you question the convention or the things that you assume are what they are, if you question them, you will be more open to learning new things. with food, for example, is this food really nourishing me? This quick fast food, the Thai from down the street or whatever it is. Assuming that, well, it tastes good, so it must be good for me. Or it's convenient, so it must be good for me. If you just question that a little bit and step back and slow down, you'll find that, actually, well, maybe there's something else that might be a little better for me. And you might be open to learning, say, a new recipe or about a different kind of nourishment. And especially for vegetarians, as I used to be one, I would say, give meat a chance again.
I love that. Give meat a chance. Tanya, thank you for your time today. This has been a delightful conversation.
Thank you so much, Hilda.
Our guest today was Tania Teschke. Visit her website, taniateschke.com, for information on her book, blog, and other resources. And I'm Hilda Labrada-Gore. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the show notes for this and every podcast episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and go to the podcast page. And now a review from Apple Podcasts. Well-Rounded by Plasma 1010. Great show for not getting caught in trends and just getting great info. That's it. Thank you so much, Plasma 1010. And please feel free to rate and review our show as well. Just go to Apple Podcasts. It's as easy as clicking on ratings and review or something like that. And tell us what you think. We'd really appreciate it because it helps get more people interested in the show. And again, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Stay well, my friend. Hasta pronto.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.